Well, we were contacted by email with someone who has been working as a car salesman for quite some time, very concerned about the fraud that he sees going on with illegal aliens. Now, of course, there's a lot of money to be made every time a loan happens, whether it's a home loan or a car loan. People are making fees. People are selling cars. They will go around the laws until they can change the laws. Now, what he told us, he says he's been seeing large finance companies giving auto loans to illegals routinely. I see them try 5 to 10 Social Security numbers until one works, and it's good enough to buy a car and get funded. I see this as fraud, period. Well, so do we. So we wanted to get his details and let you know what's going on in just this one area. Now, we vetted him. We know that he does work in the car industry in Chicago. He wishes, for obvious reasons, to remain anonymous and to have his voice disguised, so we welcome him now. So could you tell us a little bit about what you've seen, the types of fraud that you've seen working at car dealerships?
Things I've seen would be, these basically people who are here apparently in some illegal fashion or even possibly semi-illegal fashion, using what we refer to as Mexican driver's license, as a proper term would be matriculars. They've got those that they use as their IDs, but then to get a car loan, you've got to have a valid Social Security number, and then you have some type of credit that's built up to use so that you can secure the loan from the banks. Now, what I've seen is people using multiple Social Security numbers to attempt to get these loans, and predominantly, I'm of European descent, so a lot of the customers that come in and will avoid me. And when they're using these types of IDs, I look for someone who looks of Hispanic descent to speak with. And when they do, sometimes they'll be speaking in English. And I've heard plenty of times in the manager's offices people talking about it. But, they'll come back with Social Security numbers and tell the customer, well, that one says that you're dead, that you're deceased. Or things will be like, let's say the person on the Social Security number was born in 1959, but this person's ID says they were born in the 80s. Mm-hmm. I can't use those, and so they'll go through a handful of them until they actually can, come up with one that the banks will accept.
So the listeners know what a matricula is. This is something that's a form of identification offered by the Mexican embassy to Mexican citizens who are residing in another country. They've been doing that for some time. As a matter of fact, it was about 10 years ago, there was a bill that they tried to get through Congress that was defeated in 2004, I believe, that was going to stop people from using that to open bank accounts. But of course, the banks want to see this happen. They're wiring $18 billion a year out of the country, so they wanted this to happen. They want to see these automobile loans happen. Now, if somebody's a legal resident, there's a path for them to get an automobile loan, isn't there?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. There is a definite way for them to be able to do that. I've even had people who are here on visas in a legal fashion, from other countries like China or Japan. And, they are given the ability to do it, and the way they have to do it is, the loans can only be as good for as long as the visa is good for. But it's being done in, a proper fashion, and the ID and the temporary Social Security number that they use, it will be identified to them specifically. The one thing that I've seen in these other situations would be where, I don't know, many people probably haven't seen an actual credit report, but when you're looking at it, it will show aliases or other names that have been used with that particular Social Security number. And when, you see a huge list of different names that pop up on them, it's a very easy way to say, yeah, obviously this one's one that's getting passed around among, numerous different people.
It seems to me like if they don't have a Social Security number, if they're not here on a visa, that the employer is probably not paying the matching Social Security fees either, which is about half of your Social Security amount. If you are an employee, you see Social Security coming out, and of course there's no deduction for that. That's a direct tax, and it hits people at the poorest end of the spectrum because it cuts off after you reach a certain level of income. But you're paying 7.5% of a tax. and your employer is paying another 7.5%, but the employers who don't have legal employees are seeing that as a financial advantage, wouldn't you say?
Most definitely. That would be something that's real easy for them to be able to skip by, and there's many different things that I've seen them be able to get away with doing. A lot of Americans work real hard for their money and pay the taxes, and work real hard to maintain good credit so that they can be able to secure these loans. And I watch this stuff happen. Probably a few times a week at least that I've seen. And I've been doing this for well over 10 years now, and it's just at a certain point I've had enough to a point where I figured I needed to bring this to people's attention, especially in light of things that are going on currently.
I think what we're seeing here are businesses and banks who are essentially violating the law, ignoring the law until they can change the law. There are some of the organizations like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce that are pushing the GOP to ram through this amnesty program. They're going to continue to do this even if they have to commit fraud. They'd rather not put themselves out there and commit fraud, but certainly that's not going to bar them. We've seen some of the largest banks like HSBC and many others brought up just recently on massive money laundering that's been going on with drug cartels in Central and South America. So they're not going to stop doing this part of the business. And I guess the other thing that bothers me is the selective enforcement that we see from law enforcement. You mentioned the fact that these matriculas are referred to often as Mexican driver's licenses. And I can tell you that both my son in North Carolina and I here in Texas have both been hit from behind by someone who didn't speak English, had a Mexican driver's license, and the police essentially brought no charges to them, did not test them for driving under the influence or intoxication, just let them go. It looks like they're treating them as if they had some kind of diplomatic immunity, like they were some kind of ambassador from the UN or something.
That's amazing. I've heard of similar stories with customers that I've had come in. Similar types of things. I've got a sister, a similar type of a situation. And so, yeah, those are things I've definitely seen. I'm sure more and more people who hear about these things can think about, situations they know of. And, it's a pretty broad spectrum. I'm not in the Texas area. I'm in the suburbs of Chicago. And, so I'm pretty far away from the border. And even though, that this is a large Hispanic area, and it's very easy for these things to happen up in this area and other areas around the country.
One last question before we let you go, and I wanted to get a feel for the kinds of businesses that are looking the other way. Of course, it's automobile dealerships, but what about the banks? Are there large banks that are involved with this, or is this local banks that you see in the area?
It's a good question. It's definitely large banks that will get the funding for, it's any of the banks that will accept matriculars, and that I'm aware of would be Chase, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and then the manufacturer that I work for, their own bank themselves. I won't bring that one in particular, but even that one. So the manufacturers know what's going on as well. They're definitely very open to funding these types of situations. They have to definitely have, some type of a social security number that everything pops up pretty legitimate. But at the same point, it can't be legitimate when the person doesn't have a legitimate ID to go along with it. So I don't know exactly how they say this is okay to do it. One thing that happened in 2008 with the tightening of the financial market, as far as lending goes, they used to use something called a TIN number, I think ITIN number, and they were allowing them to use those numbers up until that point. And that was like a temporary identification number. And so ever since that point, they can't use those. And the customer comes in, has that number, it pops up that way. And so we have to try and find them, get them to come up with one that actually would be a legitimate type of social security number. So the banks have to be aware of what's going on. There's no other way.
Well, thank you so much for bringing that to our attention. It's yet another example of what big business is doing and what's driving what seems to be a no-sense, no-win position for the GOP. Thank you so much for reporting that to us and taking the time to let us know what's going on in your particular business. Of course, this is happening in many other businesses. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you, sir.
So if you're wondering why the GOP this week would fall on the sword, apparently, go against the wishes of over 80% of the people and support Obama's amnesty for illegal immigration, just consider the fact that this is being pushed by the largest banks, by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, that even if the GOP goes down in defeat, or even if these guys lose their seat in Congress, they're going to be able to go to K Street and become lobbyists. They're concerned only about themselves, not about the GOP, not about this country, and they really don't care about what's happening to you. That's why they don't care about what the majority of people want. Well, that's it for tonight's news. Please consider becoming a Prison Planet TV subscriber if you're not already a subscriber. Of course, that gets you the news every night as it's happening, plus access to all of Alex's documentaries. You can share that with up to 11 other people simultaneously. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back on Monday at 7 Central, 8 p.m. Eastern.
You've experienced and heard about the benefits of Super Male Vitality. Now, the new formula has arrived. Introducing the new Super Female Vitality. I have specifically designed this formula to help the body naturally regulate itself without the use of artificial hormones. Key ingredients chosen from the highest quality sources. Secure your Super Female Vitality today from our limited stock at InfoWarsLife.com.
You are watching the InfoWars Nightly News, which airs 7 p.m. Central at InfoWarsNews.com. Members can share their passcode with up to 11 other people, and your support is helping us defend liberty worldwide.